Hello everyone. My name is Kevin Im, and I'm the business team lead at A41. We have a nice weather outside, so I guess everyone's out there. But for the people inside, so we gotta have a session, right? So today, this session is about L2 and roll-up space, and here with me, we have the leaders in the space, to discuss about the topic. So I'd like to start with the brief intro of each of us. So why don't we go with you, Andrew, first?
Yeah, sure. So, founder of Metis, and we're building an app engine for Web3 on top of EigenLayer. Our first product is called 𝘔𝘐𝘚𝘐𝘕, and it is a stateless rollup built on top of EigenDA with a AVS watcher network that DA samples and verifies each account and batch of transactions. So it's a very unique model. It's very different than anything you will really see out there today. Excited for this discussion and a couple other L2 roll-up panelists here.
Thank you. Hi, my name's...
Nice.
I think it's... Hello? Oh. Yeah, it's kind of dented too. Hi, my name is Arun. I'm a researcher at Mantle. Mantle is an OP stack-based rollup that uses EigenDA for optimal data availability.
Hi everyone, my name is Tom Go. I'm the executive lead here at Metis, optimistic rollup based as well. But we have evolved into our own tech stack, removing data availability off-chain with Nemo Labs. We just recently announced we'll be working with EigenDA as well.
All right, guys. Thanks for your introduction. So let's start with this. I have a mic. So yeah. Let's start with this question first. So I want to know how each project first started, right? Andrew, you briefly explained about 𝘔𝘐𝘚𝘐𝘕, but many L2s and rollup have been created in the past few years. So what is so unique about Metis, Mantle, and Versatus in this space? Tom, you wanna go ahead first?
Yeah, sure. So Metis is one of the first L2 rollups to launch back in 2021. And at that time, it was built off the optimistic stack rollup. The vision of why Metis was created was to really expand on what Ethereum has built out. We realized there were limitations with Ethereum Layer 1, and it was primed to have a solution. So Metis was founded by Kevin 𝘔𝘐𝘚𝘐𝘐𝘕, Kevin Liu, and with Yuan in that pursuit to really drive the chain and the blockchain adoption.
So yeah, Mantle was actually the first rollup to make use of EigenDA. Even back when it wasn't called EigenDA, just a fork of EigenDA that was specific to Mantle with a dual staking model. And more recently, we've been kind of doubling down on our EigenLayer kind of utilization, and we want kind of testing ground for different AVS-based technologies. One of which you might have seen in on Twitter recently is this AVS called the Lagrange State Committee, which is essentially a zk Collect client that allows for fast interoperability, and that's testing from Mantle to the rollups without waiting for the 7-day finality window, while still maintaining strong cryptographic security guarantees. In general, we just want to kind of push the envelope of what's possible with optimistic rollups in terms of low cost, fast transactions, and better user developer experience.
Thanks. I think all of us here are probably doing it for some version of the same reason, which is to push the envelope on what's possible. L1 is very rigid. Our approach is a little bit different. It's not really all about speed, fast finality, lots of transactions, although we want all of that. For us, it's all about developer experience and how flexible can you make the developer experience. So for us, it's all about being able to meet developers where they're at. We think that the biggest problem in this space is the lack of developers. There's only about 25,000 developers building in Web3. There's 27 million in the world. So how do we onboard more developers? And for me, it's always been a question of marginal demand. The higher the barriers to entry, the more you need to teach them to a new language, new tools, new frameworks, the less developers are going to enter the space. Even if those tools and frameworks and languages are relatively easy to learn, it is a barrier to entry, and removing those barriers to entry or reducing them will lead to that next wave of developers coming on, which they'll build new dApps, they'll bring new fresh ideas. Those dApps will attract more users, and then you kind of create this virtuous cycle. So for us, our first product is called 𝘔𝘐𝘚𝘐𝘕. As I mentioned, it's a stateless rollup. The LA stands for language agnostic. So we do enable developers to build smart contracts, and we call them programs, but enable them to build programs in a variety of languages, eventually any language, and enable developers to actually bring their own language and have a framework for integrating new languages.
Got it. Thank you for your answers. I want to take this question for Mental and Metis specifically. So, from what I know, like Metis and Mental both are general purpose chains, right? If there is, like, what are the differences between L1 and L2, like general purpose chains? And plus, if there is, like, do you guys have any like specific segment or like vertical that you guys want to go after? You want to go first, Armin?
Yeah. If you're asking about a difference between L1 and L2, I guess in general, maybe you're touching on this concept of EVM equivalency. So the L1 kind of defines what the canonical EVM is, and there's no reason for any L2 to basically kind of like conform to what that definition of a canonical EVM is. Actually, it makes more sense for L2 to kind of try and implement specific features and improvements, or things they think are improvements, to try and attract developers and end users in our chain for various purposes. And these things can be things that are tailored towards specific purposes. Like for instance, there's one EIP which has been implemented on the L1, EIP 3074, which allows for users to pre-sign transactions and have to go through a type of timing flow every time they want to do an action. It's something that's very important for something like gaming, because if you're playing a game, you don't want to have to open your MetaMask and sign transaction every time you like make a move or shoot somebody or do whatever or draw a card. Just doesn't make any sense. So that's actually something we were looking at on Mantle potentially, not implemented yet, for a gaming focused for a gaming focused sector. But yeah, I think you could even go a lot further, like what Prasad is doing, where you basically have almost any kind of virtual machine you can now program in. But to get to the second part of your question of like what is Mantle kind of looking at? I would say we have kind of two major focuses. One is social, and the second is gaming. And sorry, no, let me say three major focuses: social, gaming, and DeFi, particularly DeFi that is making use of liquid stake derivatives and liquid restake derivatives. I'm sure you've seen Mantle's LSD called MEV, and one of the big benefits of being part of the Bybit system is having this very large treasury at our advantage, and we kind of make use of that to provide liquidity to dApps that are building out the L2 system that we provide.
Hey guys back there that are talking, could you go outside? If you're not going to be listening to the panel, go outside. The weather's beautiful. You can go outside. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks Andrew for the announcement. So over to you, Tom.
Yeah, so for L2, why Metis was created to expand on what Ethereum, some of the constraints, of course. And for Metis, just to add on to what was shared here, we're touching on DeFi as well. We just announced a partnership with DeFi Kingdom, which is huge. They bring culture, they bring transaction, they bring interaction. So that's our focus as well. We do have a SocialFi also application that's launching that we're basically incubating and really supporting from the foundation level. So in terms of just our area of focus, DeFi would probably be the biggest focus for us. We think with us decentralizing our sequencer, it opens up a very strong economic model that gets redistributed into the ecosystem to really drive the economic growth and also really incubate and really support the builders inside the network. So just in general, I think we touch on the same things and we're focusing on the same thing. I think this is where blockchain, DeFi, all this comes together is why DeFi was created and blockchain as well.
Got it. So I have a specific question for you at this time. There are different proof methods, right? For optimism, there is a proof, file proof, and also for ZK, there is a validated proof. So then, what is the method of proof for Laser? And again, if there's people out there that wants to build a new L2, what should they choose?
So I'm a fan of optimistic rollups primarily. I have some concerns around ZK for a couple of different reasons. Right now, if you want scalable ZK, for the most part, you're looking at snarks or something like Plonky, which requires a trusted prover. And I think we want to minimize or eliminate any trust assumptions. That's sort of the whole point of this industry. So reintroducing trust so that you can scale sort of anti-ethos to me. I think the work that Starkware is doing is fantastic, and I do think eventually it'll get there. But for that reason, I think you guys probably know what I'm going to say. We use fraud proofs. We are an optimistic rollup. The only difference is we don't retain like a full state. Basically, like the way that I describe it is like if each account is valid, then every account is valid, and we batch transactions up and roll them up into batches. And then stateless validators can sample batches from DA, replay those transactions, and if they discover any fraud, then they can submit fraud proofs. So it is an optimistic rollup. It's a little bit of a different model. The state model is different, but the proof model is the same.
Got it. Understood. So then, like, changing a gear a little bit, so I want to dig in to see, what kind of sequencer and DA you guys are using, right? So, I mean, there are like different types of like solutions out there, these days. And was there any like standard in choosing like what sequencer or like DA you guys are using right now? And how did you guys choose that? And plus, in the future, again, if there's someone out there, what should they consider in terms of like criteria in choosing like a sequencer or DA?
So I'll pass on this question because we haven't even launched our testnet yet. So
got it. Understood.
We haven't chosen a sequencer yet, but
Got it. Understood.
Yeah, so in terms of choosing the sequencer, there is generally, I think, two major things that you want to be considering. The first is just the raw throughput of your design, like how fast can it go? Because you're relying on the L1 for settlement, your requirements for your L2-based sequencer to do consensus are very much mitigated. So if you have a large POS-based network for the L2, you're essentially doing a lot of work they're ready to do because you're selling on the L1. But at the same time, you don't want to succumb at the expense of the second criterion, which is censorship resistance and liveness. Sorry, there's three criteria. But yeah, so yes. So you want it to be live. Basically, if you have a single machine which is sequencer, the machine goes offline. Your own goes offline. That's bad. No one likes that. But that's pretty easy to change by just having a simple failover machine, which is actually how a lot of L2s work these days. So one main machine, one failover, and that's kind of how they work. But that doesn't make the third criteria, which is censorship resistance. Like basically, if you have a single machine deciding all the transactions, how exactly that machine decides, I don't want transactions that come from Iraq, or I don't want transactions that mess with my like secret MVP operations I'm running on the side, then that's bad. That sequencer could do things that they don't want it to do. So these are in general three criteria that you want a sequencer to follow. And actually, this has been a pretty major area of research at Mantle recently. You may not have seen some of this stuff come out on the actual practical level, but if you look at our website, you'll see there's an article that's published about the idea of fair sequencing, basically making use of time lock encryption puzzles to create a situation where you have a bunch of users that are encrypting their transactions, submitting to a sequencer that can't see them. They can only order their transactions, and later on, later stage, those are decrypted. And we're trying to essentially create a situation where a sequencer can't really censor based on that. That doesn't get you to liveness, but it does get you to censorship resistance. And to the second part of your question, which is DA, there's really, I would say there's like two criteria. The first is that how secure do you want your guarantees of your data availability to be? If you want to make sure that your data is absolutely available on the L1 of Ethereum for the purposes of for optimistic rollup for fraud proofs, then the only solution you have is really to post that data to the L1 as call data, or after Dencun to post that data potentially in data blobs. The issue is this is very expensive. It's orders of magnitude cheaper to not do that. The posting data L1 is by far 90% of the cost of actually transaction costs in a rollup. So what do people do? They post their data to a different source, like EigenDA as Mantle to even Near to Celestia. But the issue with that is that maybe this data is not available. And in the case of optimistic rollup, that's really bad because if your data is not available, you can't fraud proof it, and the sequencer can say whatever it wants and potentially even steal with money. And that's something that's specific to optimistic rollup that's not even specific to a ZK rollup where you have a Validium-based approach. The sequencer can potentially hold funds hostage, but they can't steal funds. So yeah, there's a pretty wide gamut of considerations depending on your settlement mechanism and the security assumptions you want to make in terms of choosing your DA layer.
You covered quite a bit, actually, which is great. I'll just share our experience from the Meta side and to really how it started, where we wanted it faster, more, I say, cost-effective experience for users. We moved data availability off to Mimo Labs. That's been over a year now. But with EigenDA coming online, we see the value and the economic value. It helps secure the data even more in a decentralized way. So this kind of built upon what Metis did. So sharing the experience, so if somebody wants to choose, there's shared sequencing coming online as well. We're building our own decentralized sequencer pool. That way, we feel like that tech is closer, less connected bodies, or I would say tech, and then network as well. So the more you layer on with blockchain, the more things can happen. So for us, we're building our own decentralized pool, as we feel that that's the next step, because decentralizing a sequencer is not an easy task. Our dev team has encountered many challenges and have overcome many challenges as well, but it's almost like an untested ground for blockchain itself. From data availability, there's amazing teams building different kind of services that they can provide, Avail, Near, Eigen as well. I think for a project, as you see what's aligned to your protocol and the team that you work with, I think that's the best choice to choose and decide.
Yeah, and on the DA side, I mean, I agree with them. The one other thing I'd add is, do you need consensus on your DA layer or not? Like Celestia offers consensus as part of their DA layer, EigenDA does not. So that's a consideration, but at the same time, the benefit you get of EigenDA is that it scales horizontally. So the more decentralized it becomes, the more quorums there are, the more redundant the data is, the more it can scale. And then you also have a little bit of flexibility in terms of the level of security that you want, and a bunch of sort of optionality that you have there. So I think that there's a lot of considerations. For us, because we're going to be building other AVSs on top of EigenLayer, it just made sense for us to work with EigenDA for Laser as well. I also found the developer experience of building on top of EigenDA relatively simple and easy to use. So those were kind of our considerations.
Got it, understood. Like my next question was actually, should sequencer be decentralized or centralized? But I guess you mentioned Metis is already building like decentralized sequencer, right? Then I guess I want to tweak that question a little bit. So like in the short term, I think centralized sequencer is something that most of the L2s are following up with. But you guys are building like decentralized sequencer, I guess, in the long term, right? So what's your expectation of this market, right? Do you think eventually every L2s will pursue decentralized sequencer eventually?
Yeah, I think it's a hot topic right now, right? Some say, hey, it's not a big issue, we can wait, it's not that important. But I'll let you share, it's not a problem until it becomes a problem. There's so much capital moving into the L2 space right now that the economic impact is more greater now than before. Last year, according to L2 Beats, there was about $7 billion on the L2s. This year, around this time when I checked, $30 billion in value. So imagine that, and we're just getting started. Imagine next year. And if this doesn't really get fine-tuned, battle-tested, then we'll have an Achilles heels that, for the sequencer. And talking about centralization, of course we have some of the biggest players with the most assets on chain. It's the trust me model at the moment, but it doesn't really sustain and it doesn't really make sense. So I think long term, it makes sense in the public, and once something happens, then everybody say, hey, we need to do it now. But until then, people are, it's okay, we don't have to. But I think it's extremely important to follow the ethos of decentralization and blockchain. It makes total sense.
Yeah, I somewhat agree with that. And I think that the reason I say somewhat is because at what level is something sufficiently decentralized, and at what point do you sort of lose the benefits of being an L2 when you over decentralize, Are there ways to do like sharded sequencing so that you can still benefit from horizontal scalability as you decentralize? So there's a lot of considerations to make when it comes to decentralized sequencers. It's just, I don't think there's any one good answer, but I agree, like when something goes wrong, then everybody's gonna be rushing, like, and why, oh, we were talking about this, I was talking about this for years, and I said it was gonna be a problem, and so, and yeah, like the amount of TVL that's locked in L2s is just gonna continue to grow. So you're probably gonna see 10 other L2s launch that do the same thing that Blast did to try to like just attract liquidity. And everybody's going to come in and try to farm that. So you're going to, and at some point there will be something that goes wrong. That's sort of inevitable. I don't have like a great answer for this. I think what Arun was talking about with like sort of a commit reveal process, right? Like where you could commit the transactions that are commit encrypted transactions and only reveal the actual data within those transactions after the sequencing has occurred is really interesting for solving the censorship problem. That doesn't necessarily solve decentralization. You still do have centralization. But then the question is, do you need decentralization if you can solve censorship resistance and liveness? So there's just, I think there's too many considerations and there's no like one answer. It kind of depends on what you need out of your network.
Yeah, I think that was a really good overview. I will say that, like you mentioned, the time lock proposals, it does somewhat solve censorship, but it doesn't make you immune to block stuffing attacks. So that's something which can still cause you to censor. So there's still open questions around that particular issue. And one thing that you kind of give up by decentralizing is because if you decentralize too much comes consensus. But the issue with L2s is that you can really push performance like to a crazy level. I'm not sure if people have seen some recent work with projects like Metis where they're claiming something like 1 million TPS potentially. And I've looked at their benchmarks and I will say it does seem somewhat feasible to get to a level of 500K or 100K plus TPS. And like, it's being very hard to come to any level of decentralization on that. What you can potentially do is have heterogeneous architectures where you have single sequencers that are pushing things forward, leader election, and then you have things that are watching it, kind of making sure that this thing is behaving as it should be. And that's something kind of similar to what you see on Solana today. So that may eventually be what we see with these decentralization approaches. But I think you have to be careful about how we do this to kind of like what Andrew was saying, like not lose like what makes rollups really special.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, that's basically exactly what we're building, right? It's like you have sort of this centralized sequencer, but then you have a really decentralized network of watchers. And really what you're trying to do is make sure that the data that they produce is valid. And so if you have lots and lots of watchers, you can scale, finality effectively horizontally. And at the same time, you can scale throughput vertically. If better hardware, single centralized sequencer, you can do, I don't know, in the future you'll be able to do millions of TPS with hardware that comes out. So it's a tough question. It kind of depends on what you want to achieve.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for your diverse opinions. So this is the last question of the session. So I mean, like there are discussions of like L3 and like superchains, right? How do you guys foresee the future of L2s, and how do you think each of your projects will contribute to like the futures that you expect?
So I've actually seen discussions for L4s already, which is crazy. I don't know. I really like the way that we've built our architecture. We could actually deploy it as an L3. So we could be an L3 on top of an Optimism chain or an Arbitrum chain or any EVM chain. I don't know that that's necessary. It's not necessary yet. We haven't reached anywhere near like the need for that kind of scale where that would even make sense. If we do our job and onboard the next 1 million developers and they build some awesome dApps and you have lots of users, maybe that becomes something that's more necessary. But I don't really see a use case for it now. I know that like there's like 𝘲 just announced they're launching on Arbitrum as a gaming L3. I could kind of see the benefits of that. But I don't know that it's necessary.
Yeah, I think a lot of games are kind of launching as L3s. I think because they kind of want to have that level of control over their architecture. But like I think kind of like what Chris was alluding to, like superchain versus L3, the types of functionality that's enabled are somewhat similar by both. I think the benefit of the L3 on the superchain is that it's a lot clearer how the value accrual goes. It's such a hierarchical in nature, and you have more control. Like you have an L3 sequencer, you're okay, I'm going to sequence my roll up, I get value, I pass that value up to the L2, they get value, L1 gets value eventually. With a superchain based approach, you may even be asking these individual rollups to give up control of their sequencer, or you might have some kind of very Byzantine approach where every rollup stakes a certain amount of their own token sequencer, kind of round robins, and you gain benefit from interoperability, and the ultimate vision is somewhat compelling, but kind of like the roadmap to like get there is a little bit kind of like, you have to make sure everyone is incentivized to participate. You can't just tell people a grand vision, and every individual person loses out by participating, which I think maybe somewhat the situation change right now, even though I think we all really like it. And I think to the credit of optimism, kind of like a narrative advantage and kind of like a growth ecosystem advantage can actually overcome this. Like for instance, now we have USDC that is native across every rollup in superchain, and that's a kind of advantage that this unionization of rollups could achieve that may not necessarily be possible with the L2 architecture. Like I doubt that Circle would have like native mint burn of USDC across every L3 Arbitrum. I think that'd be kind of dangerous for them.
Yeah, I agree with the panels here sharing like why L3. I think gaming will be the one that will be pushing the barriers here. I'm not sure if Inscription will be moving there as well because they will break chains and they are breaking chains. But I think gaming is what you see, and actually it's hitting the limitations of some games where they're finding other ways to offload or process computation off chain and bring it back on chain. I think gaming is what will push L3s and make sense. Maybe something like, I don't know, maybe a game that requires more transaction speed and also gas. You got to think about that as well. I think that's one of the main things for games is like, do you want players to transact and pay? I think that's a key thing of what we got to really figure out. But gaming, I think in the next kind of era of blockchain is really going to create that blockchain adoption, reach 1 million users, and really apply what blockchain data, asset ownership to the next level and really utilize blockchain.
All right. This is it. Thanks for your opinions and thanks for your participation.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, pleasure. Thank you so much.